Hi, this is Metta Spencer, and today is Sunday, January the 25th, 2026. So it's the last Sunday in the month, and we are about to have the Global Town Hall. So I see that Marilyn Krieger is in the waiting room. I see no reason to keep her there, so I'm going to let her in. And here comes Brian. I just shut off his, and Lou Kreisberg. Good, well, we have some folks here. Hello, folks. Let me put you on gallery. So, Claire, I haven't seen you in a while. Are you in Montreal or what? Unmute yourself and say hi.
Yes, hello. Yes, I'm in Montreal. I'm a retired architect. And I'm here to save the world. Yay.
Yeah. That's right. You have the right spirit. Anything you want to share with us?
Well, I guess the latest building I'm trying to save is an old YWCA building, which has lots of small rooms in it, which would be super for homeless people. So I'm trying to save it.
Oh, well, that's a wonderful project. Terrific. And Paul Werbos is showing us a picture of...
I'm reorganizing my computers after a 3-week absence. And the camera is doing funny things.
Well, I know, but this green screen you have is, of course, I think you explained it to us once. It's the universe, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's an actual photograph of the universe.
Uh-huh.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah, hi. Good to see you. Uh-huh. Yeah, and so I was just saying hi to Paul Werbos, who's been on a trip to Norway.
Curious, what portion of the sky is that a photo of?
I know it was a picture from gravitational lensing, and there are about 2,000 pictures like this on the web from NASA's gravitational lensing pictures. But exactly which segment of the sky, I don't know, but I think it looks like this in all directions.
What do you mean?
Okay.
It
looks like it does try to capture the foamy, bubbly nature of the universe, and I appreciate the way it's drawn. I'm just wondering, is it a 3D reconstruction, or is it a photo in one spectrum?
It's in a sense, it's like an X-ray.
Right.
So the actual inputs are from gravitational perturbations rather than things our eye sees. Our eyes don't see X-rays either. But it's a thorough mathematical sort of holographic reconstruction of what's out there. And they have three-dimensional versions. The galaxies are the little orange dots. The little orange dots are something like 5% of the mass energy of the universe. Most of the universe is not the little orange dots, which are galaxies. Most of the universe are these giant filaments. It's like a huge network of what we call dark matter. Although if you look at it, you'll see the term matter might not exactly describe entirely what you're seeing. and there is a big study in science with many different points of view on just what is it that we are seeing. This is a very important question in science. What are we seeing and how can we understand it better? And what I would like to give priority to, what I think is one of the highest priorities for the whole human species, we now know how to take a picture of this stuff beyond our galaxy. But can we take a picture of this stuff in our galaxy? And there are legitimate arguments about, do we think there's a whole lot of this stuff in our galaxy? I think there's good reason to believe there's a lot of it and it has a lot of importance. And other people think, oh, no, that's a space thing. That can't be here in our galaxy. And we don't know. And we should find out, for God's sake.
A new gamma ray observatory, a pair of them, one in Chile and one in Spain, that are working to image the gamma ray glow around the galaxy as a potential signature of this dark matter.
Yeah, there's a lot of work on dark matter, and there are many different theories. I have mine.
I'd love to hear it.
So, actually, it has other policy implications. My very first job at NSF, I started work in 1988 or 89, depending how you count it. I ran a workshop in something which was called cold fusion. And most people at the end of the year learned that that was a joke and a fad. That's not what I learned. There were two big, serious scientific conferences on cold fusion in 1989. One held by the Department of Energy, and I went to that conference and was fully connected. And one was from the National Science Foundation, the Electric Power Research Institute, and I was the grand leader of that whole thing. But of course, I depended on a lot of other people. Two of the people who came to that conference were a guy named Ed Teller, you might have heard of.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I've met him a few times.
Oh, really? Great. Yeah. Everybody should be aware of this name, Ed Teller. He's the father of the hydrogen bomb, among other things. He was the head of Lawrence Livermore Labs. And then there's another guy who is more famous to real physicists, Julian Schwinger, who won the Nobel Prize for quantum field theory, which is the foundation of mainstream physics today. They both came to my conference, and they both came to me. And what they said is, we have new experiments which prove that the old standard model of physics, which we called electroweak theory plus QCD, the old theory does not fit their experiments. And their experiments show it is possible to do things with nuclear energy, which should be impossible. And we discussed what is possible, what is not, how does the universe work? And they said in the end, this should not be made public because this is too dangerous right now. But times may change. Paul, we want you to use your judgment, but we want you to promise to work with us, to be honest, in hiding this technology. Teller and his people wanted people not to do this technology because they felt it would be too dangerous. If every high school lab in the world could produce nuclear materials to blow up the city they live in, maybe we don't want to kill everybody just to prove how smart we are. And so I promised to Teller and Schwinger I would keep it totally quiet until times change. As of this year, times have changed. And I think one of the things we need to do is to better understand how the universe really works. And Schwinger had the beginnings of a next generation theory of nuclear forces and how they work. And I even took that a little further. And the thing is, we need to find some people we can trust to do that work without causing problems. And that's a really tough moral problem.
Sure, I agree. As a fellow Hertz Fellow, I think Ed Teller helped to coordinate the Hertz Fellowship. We've got hundreds, if not 1,000, top PhDs who would be interested in that. And there's quite a legacy of the Hertz Foundation with Edward Teller. And, you know, if that's real, we should get that information to that group, if not a larger group. And, you know, we've got a lot of top PhDs and a huge alumni network that could actually try to move that forward. So I'm happy to put forward that topic if it would be helpful, and perhaps you could give a talk at a future Hertz Fellow gathering.
Yes, I would love to, because this is a great challenge.
Paul, I have a question for you. Why do you think now is the right time, especially with how things are going with Trump and some of the other dictators? Why would now be a correct time to do this?
Okay. I have sat down and thought about the pros and cons. And it was pretty complicated. I remember the whole story. Obviously, the biggest con is the danger that the wrong people will develop certain bad things in secret.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of good things, I think it becomes ever more important that we learn how to see the sky. And the thing about seeing the sky is there's several components to that. There is sensing, there is computing, and there is analysis. And those things should be connected. I was hoping in Norway, to be honest, there are two interesting universities there, one in Tromsø and one in Trondheim. And my hope was these might be good places for open, international, fundamental, cross-disciplinary research, beginning with two tasks. The mathematical task of understanding how the universe works, more precisely, what is the Lagrangian? I basically think I know how it works. I need to explain that to people. But you need to know something called the Lagrangian function of the universe. Nobody on Earth has a right to say they know it, but we have ideas and ways to test it, and we need to do lots of experimentation to find out how things really work at the level they don't look at yet, even in mainstream science. And mainstream science looks at less now that Trump is in office. Mainstream science used to look very aggressively at a lot of important topics that are not being examined because of the change in funding priorities. And that's why I thought Norway might be a good place to go for that. As I speak, I should say there are places in Canada with competence. I mentioned to Meta, there's a guy named Lee Smolin, Smolin, in Waterloo. And he's the closest I know to someone who has published and understands the things you need to know to get the nuclear stuff straight. Most of what people believe about nuclear forces is totally wrong. It's garbage. It sells like Mickey Mouse ears. But this guy Smolin in Waterloo is the closest to really understanding this fundamental physics in the world. I sent the email to Meta and she said, gee, a lot of what he writes is not the most trivial stuff to understand. And that's true. If you're the world's authority in advanced nuclear physics, it may require a little bit of translation, but that's the job of translators, to connect to him and get the information out. So Canada does have the resources to do what I was hoping Norway would do.
You did urge me to interview this man. I'm totally incompetent to interview him. And I don't know anybody that I would say I know is competent. If any of you have ideas, let me know, because setting up a thing like this, we could really look stupid. I could look incredibly stupid because I don't know beans. I got C in high school physics, if not a D, as I recall. So
well, it was my job at NSF to try to create communications between people who don't yet understand each other. So part of that art is figure out who has to talk to whom about what. I mentioned that
the conversation these smart people will have is totally different from anything that we could put out there for the public. The problem is the gap between what real scientists talk about and what ordinary people can comprehend. You have many different theories you've mentioned here. What is your, just give us one. Or let me have Brian interact with you, because Brian, you can steer him in the direction that maybe I can't.
Well, there are several theories for dark matter in the universe, and Paul's alluded to his favorite. I'd love to hear his thoughts.
Yeah, so what we see in this picture, I see it as a mixture of what we ordinarily call matter and what we call force. In fact, in the theories I believe, what we call matter is ultimately just a matter of knots of force tied together. Some people call these solitons. And they're really good mathematical models of elementary particles as knots of tying together. I think of them, I'm looking at my shoes. We tie our shoelaces. There are some particles that could be modeled as something like shoelaces tied together as a knot of force. And the only question is, what kind of shoelaces are we using to tie these knots? And the first answer is there are several possibilities that work and a million that don't. I spent a big part of my life finding one theory that would work. And then once you understand how it works, you realize there are a million other theories. I just hadn't thought of them. And that's why we need to do a lot of empirical research to better understand which of the possible theories is right, to narrow it down. One of the things I think of, I'm tempted to be technical because that's how I think. Okay, mm-hmm. Julian Schwinger, when he looked at the standard model and then he compared to his experiments, he said standard model doesn't fit. There is a force field called A mu, the electromagnetic field, well known to all serious physicists. A 4-vector, A sub mu, 4 numbers at every point in space. That defines the electromagnetic field the way most people think of it. Schwinger said that doesn't quite work. if you assume an A mu field and an adjoint field A mu star, you can explain things like magnetic monopoles and like the kind of experiments I've been doing, and that changes everything. And it does. But that was just the first step in a journey of many, many attempts. Schwinger's early theories were not powerful enough, but he and I and others, a few people, worked on it. And my present best guess is that there's a thing called the current vector, J sub mu. Brian, you might have heard of J sub mu. It's the electromagnetic current field, 4 numbers at every point in space, J sub mu. And if you assume that there's a J sub mu and a J sub mu star, these vectors can form things like shoelaces. You can use them to tie them up to make things like particles. And the claim is that that's good enough to explain everything we've ever seen in physics, but it changes some of the rules. Like if you untie the shoelaces, you might get a supernuclear explosion beyond the imagination of most people. And you can't. And Schwinger knew exactly how. And that's why I didn't want us to talk about it too much, because a new Lagrangian for the universe based on a J mu and J mu star field together can explain a whole lot of things. It fits the whole database.
Does this explain gravitational fields, or do we need to use a gravitational field to explain gravitational waves? So I guess my question is, does that J mu theory enable a quantitative description of gravitational waves?
I'm tempted to be precise, and I hope people will forgive me, okay? There's a thing called the standard model of physics. Some people pray to it. Some people know what they're praying to, and some people it just sounds good. But about half of the work of serious physicists in the physical review letters, they have a whole section on beyond the standard model. Where does the standard model break down and how can you do better? And everybody knows it's a serious area for research, but how do you do it? And Schwinger had some ideas, and some of these people don't. They're not connected to experiment. So in the standard model of physics, that standard model, which half the population really believes, it's actually a grafting together of 2 older theories, one of which was called electroweak theory, and the other one is called the quark model or quantum chromodynamics. Those are big subjects, which we could talk about a lot, but not here. What Schwinger was saying is we need to replace them with a better nuclear theory, which connects the pieces. But what about gravity? And there is this question, what do you do with gravity? And that's a whole other area of research. My personal belief is that most of physics, you don't need gravity to explain. People invoke gravity to try to explain all kinds of things which I don't think it is needed for. People assume that consciousness and the soul, it must be due to gravity. That does not work. And you look at the neuroscience, it doesn't require gravity. But on the other hand, gravity is there. So people have a right to ask me, if you think that nuclear physics depends upon a new theory of nuclear forces, what do you do with gravity? That's a legitimate question. My view of gravity, there's a guy named Moshe Carmeli who has a book called Classical Fields. And this is a radical conservative point of view, like Albert Einstein. It's as radical and conservative as Albert Einstein was. Not quite Donald Trump kind of conservatism, different kind of conservatism. And immediately people have a right to ask, if you believe Moshe Carmeli's theory of how gravity connects to the rest of the forces, you have a lot of explaining to do. And they're right. I have about 20, 30 years worth of explaining to do, a lot of fundamental mathematical issues. Einstein, von Neumann, and Wigner and Norbert Wiener looked at these mathematical issues, and they were stopped by problems they didn't even know what the problems were. And thanks to my job at NSF and my experience, I found out what the problems are. I could explain them in what I think is plain English. Maybe one of you might understand them plain English. what the hell, Plain English was they all assumed quantum mechanics was a wave function when really it was a density operator. That's a quick summary. And if you go to the right quantum mechanics, you can explain it in a way that fits Moshe Carmeli's and Einstein's point of view. So forgive me, that's a bit technical, but hey, that's reality.
In summary, do you have some thoughts on the nature of dark matter based on your analysis so far?
Well, mixture of force and energy. I mean, yeah, that's force and particles, which are basically solitons.
Right.
And the forces are like this J mu and J mu star. That's what I think when I look at these lines, most of what we're seeing is J mu and J mu star.
Mm-hmm. Well, now,
which we can manipulate in technology.
What's significant about dark matter is its gravitational influence. And what strikes me is that gravitational waves and the like, I wonder, I would ask the question whether this J mu star is capable of really predicting the gravitational waves that we see.
Okay, so I will try to be intelligible because this is kind of a mathematical question.
Sure.
I might want to start with an analogy, though. When you look at an X-ray picture of your bones and you see how much the X-rays reveal, do you conclude that bones must be X-ray machines? No. X-rays are ways we see the bones, but the bones are not essentially X-ray machines. So we use gravitational waves to see these giant filaments of force. But I don't think these giant filaments are primarily caused by gravity. They interact with gravity, everything does. But I don't think when you look at this, if you see a bone, you're not seeing an X-ray machine. If you look at the universe, you're not seeing a gravitational wave producer. That's not its function, but it does produce waves, just, this is a secondary function. But I think what's holding it together is nuclear force.
Okay, that's helpful. But now, when we look at the foamy structure of the cosmos, as you've depicted behind you, isn't that largely due to gravitational attraction?
Yeah, and if you look at our solar system, the shape of our solar system, gravitational attraction between the planets and the sun is what you see. However, if you do chemistry on Earth, it is nice to know which direction is gravity. But other than that, the fine-grained features of gravity are not as critical to understanding our normal experiments on Earth as understanding the electromagnetic forces or even the nuclear forces nowadays.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think when we're looking at this structure of the universe, though, gravity would seem to be dominant, particularly with respect to the distribution of galaxies and the distribution of dark matter. Wouldn't you agree?
The issue is, why do these big filaments of force look the way they do?
Mm-hmm. If you run gravitational simulations, don't you get the structure?
Well, to be honest, my priority is we need to learn how to see and understand the dark matter within our own galaxy.
I agree. Oh, well, let me tell you about this. There's a really great new observatory being commissioned. It's called a ground-based gamma ray observatory. And here's how it works. There are going to be gamma rays coming in from the center of our galaxy and other locations, hitting the atmosphere. And what they're doing is taking an array of telescopes and looking at the atmosphere, not looking at the stars. And when a gamma ray comes in, they can do a 3D tomography and treat the atmosphere like a cloud chamber and actually work back the 3D tomography of the direction and energy of that gamma ray. So these telescopes are going to be looking at the atmosphere and piecing together a 3D picture of the gamma rays coming from the center of our galaxy.
So that's great. And now, forgive me if I use a metaphor, because for normal people, in fact, even for me, for everybody, metaphors are critical to human understanding. Okay, the analogy is to a different branch, but related, of science. I'll remember a time about 2 years ago, my wife tells me to be careful about how I use her name. I think it's legitimate, what I'm about to do. every Saturday for lunch, we invite over a neighbor and we have a meeting as far as we can understand of 3 people. Me, I understand some things, but my wife understands some things I don't. And we have a neighbor called Ed who also understands some things I don't. And while we were having lunch, they said, we've been reading some strange things in Science Magazine and in Scientific American. They claim in Scientific American and in Science that a group called the Breakthrough Institute, you've heard of them, based in the Bay Area. They are a fascinating organization. They claim that they have seen technosignatures from outer space. And they have multiple arrays, multiple connected networks of radio telescopes and optical telescopes and others, all looking at the sky. And this institute is looking for evidence of life other than our Earth life. And they published articles saying we have found observations from the Centauri system which cannot be explained by any technologies or phenomena presently known to science. We are other than alien life forms manipulating technology. We call this technosignatures. Technosignatures from space means things that we couldn't explain except by assuming technology beyond our solar system. And when these articles were published in Science and Scientific American, the Breakthrough Institute was very careful. They said, we haven't found an alternate explanation. We are sure it exists. All of our colleagues are sure it exists. We know it must exist because we know there can't be intelligence beyond ours. How could there be any intelligence in the universe beyond us humans? But because we know that, we know there must be another explanation. But for now, we can't find it. And the only explanation we can think of is, my God, these are real signals coming from the Centauri system. So my wife and our neighbor both said, Paul, this is a data analysis project. They had a huge database coming from these places. They analyzed it. You know about data analysis. I said, I certainly do know about data analysis. That's an area where I can claim world-class expertise. They said, okay, we want you to look over these articles in Science and Scientific American and the analysis which went into it. And we would like to hear your judgment about whether we should believe what these people are saying or not, and what do you conclude? And so I got hold of the raw data. I got hold of the history of these projects. And when I went through it, I said, you guys have a real problem. You've got a huge, massive database, and you're using the best tools you have, but you're not using the best tools that we humans have in general. I know much better tools for data analysis than anything you are using. My first response was to say, I know a company in Canada called D-Wave, based in Vancouver. They are very famous in the quantum computing business. I knew what D-Wave had promised to Google, why Google gave them money to develop this unique quantum technology. I have read their description of what they could do. I even had a friend who was working with this management in Vancouver. And I looked at their stuff and I got excited. And I said, obviously, the solution is to use the D-Wave technology to analyze the data that these guys have collected. And I even called together meetings of people by internet. And we talked about, okay, let's go. And then when we got into it, I started feeling a dark feeling. I knew what D-Wave had sold to Google. The papers were solid enough that Google believed them and put in millions of dollars. But when I looked at it, I said, you know, these guys at Google don't know this kind of physics. I do. They don't. Because part of my job at NSF was to keep up with this kind of physics. And Google didn't keep up with the kind of stuff we knew at NSF. And as I looked at it, I realized the D-Wave technology would not work on this problem. And I felt really deeply upset. And then when I recovered from my upset, I said, but wait a minute. The D-Wave people don't know this kind of electronic photonic technology, but I do. That was my job for many years, to learn how it works. Their system won't work, but I know how to fix it. So I published a couple of papers in IEEE journals. You know, these politicians don't read IEEE journals. But I published a couple of papers in IEEE journals. And there was a patent attorney who read one of them and he said, Paul, can I file a provisional? I'm not asking for any money. It'd be nice if you'd pay the patent filing, but all I want is some consideration if they grant a patent based on you sending me these papers and authorizing me to file. So I said, okay. Bottom line is last year I got a patent which covers a radically new quantum observation technology, which is a general technology for pattern recognition from videos of images, including this stuff. And my feeling is if we applied the quantum pattern recognition, the new pattern recognition, D-Wave plus, D-Wave fixed, and we apply it to this stuff, we'll have a much better idea of what's going on even inside our galaxy, even with the database you mentioned. The data you're mentioning from the upper atmosphere, this is a huge database. This database of what you can see in the upper atmosphere, it sounds every bit as complicated as the data that Breakthrough Institute is looking at. It's also every bit as complicated as the solar flare data, which I think is an incredibly important test bed. Half of what I discussed with Norway is how do you deal with solar flares, solar storms, space weather. This is a big and important subject in itself, but it can also be a test bed for the quantum pattern recognition technology. So the quantum pattern recognition technology is important to understanding how the universe works and understanding how dark matter and energy really interacts. We have to be able to analyze and see the data. We have to be able to model the dynamics of what we're seeing, and we need more powerful processing technology to do that.
Okay, Paul. My normal rule, sort of, there's no real rule, but I usually believe nobody should speak more than 3 minutes at a whack.
I apologize.
No, don't apologize, because I do think it was valuable, really valuable, very important what you're saying, but it has gone on for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I think, please don't apologize, because I left it going because I really do believe that what you're saying can be meaningful and useful to somebody, although not for me. Yeah, Marilyn.
I know you want to move on, but I just want to ask Paul, so when you analyzed the data, what did you find about the signals coming from Centauri? Do you think it is life form, or what did you find? I'm like sitting on the edge of my seat and want to know it down.
I have my personal speculations, but the real bottom line is nobody on Earth knows. So I've been in policy discussions of space policy, international space policy. And there are 3 points of view that I think are fundamental on what should our space policy be. The first viewpoint I think of as the Chinese viewpoint. There's a guy named Xray Liu who wrote a science fiction trilogy, which is the bestseller science fiction produced in China, called The Three-Body Problem. My wife touched me on the shoulder and she said, Paul, you have to read The Three-Body Problem. I said, why? Well, she said, among other things, Obama recommended it. The guys who run the IT companies recommended it. So therefore, you should lose your pride. And if they think you should read it, you should read it already. And you read science fiction. So I did. Xray Liu has a book called The Three-Body Problem. And the essence of The Three-Body Problem is at the end of 3 volumes, their advice to policymakers is hide. They say there is other intelligence out there. It's a forest. It's a jungle. You don't want the tigers to eat you. The best thing you can do is hide. So that's the Xray Liu policy. Many people believe that's what we should do in this universe. Then there's what I think of as the Russian policy. Milner, who funded the Breakthrough Institute, Milner was basically saying we should be friends with our fellow conscious beings in the Centauri system. And we should declare our friendship in the same way that Russia declares friendship with the Ukraine. And he had real plans that were underway to build a fleet of intelligent drones. But he knew science better than Putin does. And he had plans that were workable for sending a fleet of drones to the Centauri system to say hi, just as they said hi in the Ukraine, with contingency plans for what to do. So there is that policy. So that's the second theory of how to deal with extraterrestrial intelligence. Just build a bunch of drones to go there, see, say hello, and interact. That's the opposite of the Chinese policy. I recommended a third policy. I still recommend the third policy, which is before you contact these other solar systems, improve your knowledge, develop your situational awareness, say hello if it looks right, defend yourself if it looks necessary. But for God's sake, number one priority, situational awareness. And that's why seeing the sky is such a high priority, partly because we need to know what's going on in our own planet, but partly because it would be nice to know who else is out there.
Got it. Okay, Paul. Now it's been 45 minutes. So
Sorry. Okay.
this time's up.
My hand's up. I'd like to provide some summary.
Brian, quickly.
Thank you. So yesterday I reviewed a detailed analysis of the three-body problem as applied to Alpha Centauri, which is a 3-star system. And they concluded quite conclusively, actually, based on data from the Webb telescope, that there's no basis for life in Alpha Centauri. Fundamentally, there's no signature for water. It's burned off most of its volatile elements. And that's partly due to the dynamics of three-body problems. And I've attached the YouTube in the chat. I encourage you to listen to those 2 hours. And that act provides a very detailed description of why there's no indigenous life in Alpha Centauri. And to quote Elon Musk, I am an alien. On the other hand, I've seen absolutely no evidence of any signs of intelligent life beyond our planet so far.
Thank you. All right. That is a conclusion to a very interesting conversation, which I suppose there are many people out there who will get much more out of it than I can. Thank you all, because I can recognize somebody talking about something intelligent and important, but I can't shape the conversation whatsoever. All right, thank you all. Now let's open our conversation for this worldly kinds of things. Specifically, I would hope that we would address some of the changes that I have sensed this past week because of the ups and downs of the terrible threat that we felt about the likelihood that the U.S. was going to invade Greenland, and then the backing away from that, the taco instance in the Switzerland, the Davos meeting. And what does all this mean? There was a very important speech given by Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, basically saying the New World Order that we have been following until now. We paid a heavy price for it, but it was probably worth it. We had a lot of benefits from it. It was definitely dominated by the U.S., but there were advantages to going along with that. But the advantages have gone, and now we have to land on our feet and try something different. There's been a rupture, as he put it, in the world order, and the terms under which we are all functioning are no longer to be taken for granted. We've got to create something new. Now, what I want us to think about, if we haven't already, probably some of us have given some thought to, what would something new look like? What is it that the rest of the world needs or could consider doing that would make the middle powers and the global south, let's say, able to function collectively, but not that is without the participation of the U.S. So let's. I'd like your thoughts about that, and then of course we can go through and talk to everybody about whatever else is on your mind. But I'd like to have some notion of what we need to do to put together a different system of governing the world and governing trade relations and so on. Claire, I think you have your hand up.
I do, because thinking about the universe is really fun, but I think we have a lot of little problems here on Earth that need attention. And I'm really hoping that the General Assembly will decide that the Security Council is not really helping very much, and that they get together and just decide this world, it belongs to everyone, not just the Executive Council. So I'm hoping that they will continue working with Ukraine and Russia and Palestine and Israel, and get them organized so that they're not killing each other.
All right. Brian, is that a hand up for you?
Yeah, I think we're at the cusp of dramatic abundance. And even though the United States has rejected renewable energy and batteries, I think the middle powers could do a great job of really leaning into battery, wind, and solar. The International Energy Agency, which is a very conservative body of electrical engineers and power engineers, have already concluded that solar is the cheapest electricity in history. And yet the United States is turning its back on it. Canada has an abundance of wind. There's an abundance of batteries available in China. And I think the first thing we do for our communities is build abundant and affordable electricity. That can help us to develop abundant food sources when it comes to precision agrivoltaics, precision fermentation, and precision mariculture. And the third is abundant labor in the form of AI and robotics. And in fact, we're building a farm bot that's able to seed and weed and water, and we're extending the existing open source farm bot technology from 3 by 6 meters to 3 by 100 meters, which can enable hectares of land to be cultivated with minimal human labor required, and yet plenty of simple gantry robot labor. And so I look to recharging our communities with stellar technologies of abundant energy, food, and labor. And I'm happy to dive into that. There's 3 in the food space alone. But effectively, it's about decentralizing a lot of our technologies, accepting the fact that global trade is broken to some extent. We're going to have to deal with regional trade, and really leaning into building abundance within our communities that take care of our people.
Okay. Now, one of the critiques that was made, I think somebody, maybe Ross, you thought that the New York Times, but I'm not sure, did make a serious criticism of Carney's speech, which was otherwise very warmly received by most of the people apparently at the Davos meeting. And he pointed out that we have now 2 major countries dominating the global economy, the global governance, and military possibilities, and that is simply the U.S. and China. And that if you withdraw from the U.S., what that automatically is going to mean is that you go to China. Now, just be aware that that's what will happen. And in fact, that is exactly what happened because with Canada, because Carney was stopped in Davos, I think, on his way home back from a trip to visit China, where he did make a new deal, a new trade arrangement, and not only trade arrangements, but obviously some kind of rapprochement, some kind of reconciliation between the 2 countries that had been at odds, very much in tension. So now, if that is true, of course that brings into question such as issues as if we don't like the U.S. human rights, we don't like what's going on in Minneapolis today, for example. Will we like any better if we look closely at it? Would we like what's going on in China any better in terms of human rights or in terms of democracy, etc.? Is this really selling out our commitment to liberal values for the sake of just getting rid of this difficult problem with the U.S.? And I think I'd like somebody to address that question.
I think China is somewhat preoccupied with multiple coups underway right now. There may have been possible arrests by two of the top three that were coordinating China. Xi Jinping is working to make a comeback power-wise, and the concern is there's possible purges that would occur throughout the military and the CCP. So it looks very dark at the moment and uncertain. I do recommend the YouTube that I've attached from one of the prominent speakers, Zhang Yujia. Oh no, that's the name of the talk. I believe it's Let's Real Talk. Yeah. Anyway, that's a very helpful YouTube, I believe, on the present situation.
Well, I want to thank you for that. I have downloaded that. And I'd say one of the problems I see in the United States, I get to see U.S. decision makers here. And there's a lot of debate here. And there are people here who claim to be experts in China about all kinds of things. But I've been to China many times. And I know that a lot of what these experts claim to know about China is total, absolute bullshit. I've seen the real place, and it's different. And one of the biggest differences, people who pretend to be experts will tell you, China thinks this, China thinks that. This is what the Chinese believe. But there's more than one of them. And I say, when you talk about what do the Chinese think, you got to remember there's more than one of them. And the diversity in China is a critical variable.
Okay, fair, very fair point. But Lou Kreisberg had his hand up first. Lou.
Well, I just want to say that I think Trump is not all of America. The resistance is huge. The businesses are not that transformed. They're globalized as they have been, and that goes on. And Trump is not forever. I mean, he will be doomed. He's doomed. I don't know what will replace, but it's probably something like it's been, and maybe a little wiser, that the people would realize that selfishness and cruelty is not the best way of living with other people. And I think there is a good chance that the reaction is quite progressive. So I do gratified what Prime Minister Carney said, and it should be, it makes sense that more parts of the world play bigger roles. But it does, I think we shouldn't overdo what we think America is. If you say in China, there's a lot of different people. In the United States, there are too. And as I say, the resistance is very widespread and it is growing. And then in the repudiation, it might be we discover, well, I would put a plug in for the conflict transformation perspective of the value of constructive ways of dealing with each other and the value of that. So,
Thank you. Now, let's see. If I'd love to hear from some of the four people here who haven't spoken yet. Kathy O'Connell is hiding. I wish you'd turn your face on, dear. I'd love to see you. Charles Tauber is in Vukovar, Croatia. Andrei Kamenshikov is, I presume, in Kiev, where he lives. And Alexei Prokhorenko is also a Russian, as Andrei is. And Alexei is living in Warsaw. And it would be good to hear thoughts from these non-Western Alliance people. Kathy could maybe comment from the perspective of India, India is not represented here otherwise, but Kathy knows a lot about India and India's point of view. So I'd love to hear from you, Kathy. But how about somebody from the former Soviet region, either Alexei or Andrei?
Going back to the wonderful speech by Prime Minister Carney, I would just express my utmost elation. I don't know. I was excited when I listened to it 3 times to catch every word, to just because it's really worth it. It's really worth it. I think in some time it will be called historic speech, because in our cynical times it marks maybe a turning point. It's an anthem to virtues, values, and something that runs contrary to what the world is very much about right now, to transactionalism, to deals. I maybe would think back to the non-aligned movement in a certain way, which brought together such diverse countries as Indonesia, Yugoslavia, and Egypt. I think Egypt was one of the few countries that were members of that movement. So probably some of its history needs to be revisited and then studied in more depth. But the question is whether or not those countries, which have very disparate interests otherwise, other than just trying to counteract this world order, this dictate of the powerful, whether they can really sustain this unity, whether they can long term be like united long term, which is needed to exert a certain influence. Maybe there is something to discuss. Maybe there is a platform. There is a new version of the non-alignment movement which will come into being. And I think this speech, which we heard 3 days ago, I think it's a good foundational brick, a good cornerstone, which can be one of the basis, one of the key milestones on this probably way forward.
Thank you.
I also was actually very impressed by the Mark Carney, is that his right name? His speech just really was just so strong, really, but I think we need to be very, if we want to be successful, we need to be very sober in our assessments. My personal feeling is that there's a cycle. After I get a feeling that what happens is after a few generations live in relative peace and relative prosperity, I don't know if it's people become more stupid or whatever, but people forget or stop valuing the basic values on which their society and their peace and prosperity is built on.
People who haven't been through a war and haven't had to make the sacrifices and make the difficult decisions that were made at that time don't appreciate how important these contributions were.
People want to see simple answers to complex situations, and and being wise, understanding the complexity, understanding why, you can't just go directly and do what you think is, logical and right from a very simple perspective. That requires some knowledge, some understanding, and that knowledge is lacking. I see that it's lacking around here, when I try to speak about certain things. But I also see that it's, for me, the problem isn't really Trump. It's that half the population supported, a guy like.
Absolutely. Also, another angle too, though, Andre, I think we have to realize that really there have been changes in the world, and that the problems facing us now really do require some new changes. For example, the United Nations is not working. I mean, it can't work with the veto of the Security Council, etc. There is a need for something like the Parliamentary Assembly, which would give votes to people and not just states, so that we could have, because states certainly do not necessarily represent the interests of their own population. Their people may have quite different interests, quite reasonably, and that needs to be changed. There could also be different alliances formed. For example, some people have said maybe Canada should join the EU. It happens that there's a certain little island where Canada and I think Denmark are actually at a certain, there's a boundary of maybe 3 or 4 miles where they actually are contiguous. So Canada is contiguous to Europe and could be admitted to as a member of the EU. If that's a good idea, let's consider, would that be a good idea? What would be the implications of doing that? I don't know. But we do need to make some changes. And this needs to be a time when we think about how to make those changes. Because if you have a break and people say, we want an organization that does not even include the US, and maybe it should be an organization that also does not include Russia. And maybe it should be an organization that doesn't include China. I don't know. I mean, we got to think about what kind of organization, a global organization, might actually be able to handle the problems that are being denied and obfuscated by the existing powers in the United Nations. So those are the kinds of changes that I think are up for possible consideration now. And we couldn't have taken them seriously even 2 weeks ago. So excuse my interrupting, Brian, but go on. Andre.
After listening to that, I felt that, in this very theoretical construction where there's some kind of new alliance of, Canada could be, with the current leadership, could be play a leading role in some kind of new alliance of countries. But then the big question is, how stable are the systems in Germany and France? I don't know, in Canada, I don't know that much about internal politics in Canada. But, in France and Germany, you certainly have very strong political movements, that are challenging the current order as well.
No, I just want to remind again that the United States is likely to be much better for what it has learned from the terrible experience that we're going through now. There are parts of the Democratic Party who are thinking more creatively than ever. And I think we've learned, a lot of people are learning what cruelty, stupidity, egocentricity is destructive, and we don't want it anymore.
That's not true. I just yesterday read something in the New York Times where they did polls, and they find that basically public opinion has not changed. The people who liked Trump even 6 months ago, are still committed to Trump. The people who didn't like him are still the same numbers. The only thing that's changed a little bit has been in the independents. So among the independent political group. So the truth is, they are still standing by their man, come hell or high water, and that is, and besides which, the Europeans have learned something from it. What they say is, look, even if the U.S. changed completely and you had a completely wonderful administration, we're only one election away from reverting to the same darn thing. Nowadays, we know we cannot be that dependent on the U.S. in the future. That's certainly the message that Carney was giving. You know, even if the U.S. straightens out and figures it all out, we can't be that dependent on the U.S. in the future.
Yeah, there's strong bipartisan support for the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution, which relates to unreasonable search and seizure. There are many cases of ICE breaking into homes and pulling people out of their homes. And there is strong Republican support for the Constitution and for this. And thus, the actions of the President administration and ICE are extremely unpopular among many Republicans because of the violations of the Constitution.
Not on the polls. Anyway, Paul?
Yeah, there have been many polls of U.S. opinion, and where I live, I see a lot of these polls. My general impression, a little fuzzy, is that about 15% of the people support Trump, 15% support the Democrats, and the vast majority are deeply disappointed that both choices are so bad and so scary as they are. And the question is, okay, if you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, where can you find a third alternative? And that's really where the American public is at.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I think if people really want to move beyond two parties, it's very simple. There's a very clear formula, and that is you go with ranked voting and open primaries. And what the ranked voting does is ensure that your vote does count, even if you vote for the candidate you want the most. You got your backup votes, and that works really well. And I'm very happy to be doing that here in Australia, where that's a standard part of the system. Much better when it comes to democratic elections. The second is open primaries, and what that would do is enable every resident of a state to vote in any of the primaries, and that would move it from a left-right extremism primary situation to one where they need to appeal to the middle. And thus, those two interventions, which have already been adopted, I believe, in Alaska, and has been up on the ballot in Nevada and other states, and ranked voting is currently used in cities like San Francisco. These two reforms could move us beyond two parties as long as we got the super PACs under control.
I saw some recent polls that are saying that 60% now of the public is not approving of Trump, and that has happened since what's going on in Minneapolis with the execution of Renee Good, and then the guy, I can't remember his name,
Alex
today, who was executed.
Alex, the nurse.
Yeah, that's it. Mm-hmm. Right.
Both 37 years old, struck down in the prime of life.
Exactly right. And then there's a couple of other incidents that have occurred also. So I am hopeful. I'm hopeful. But I'll say what does worry me about, the whole thing worries me. But it looks like with Trump granting immunity to everybody, does that mean that ICE thinks that they can get away with a whole bunch of stuff and not worry about being, having any repercussions?
Could I ask if anybody has thoughts about the Board of Peace? The Board of Peace is going to replace the United Nations, I think.
It's a sham and a joke.
Yeah.
Trump's notion of free speech is Trump gets to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me a break. Look, it's not multilateral. It's not a plurality.
Okay, how do we reform the United Nations? Because we really, really, really need a good global governance. And
it's very clear that we have to move beyond consensus. We have to move towards consent-based frameworks. People need to learn the distinction between consensus and consent. Consensus is everybody has to sign on the bottom line. But if you look at sociocracy for all or other well-established sociocratic circle methods, consent is the removal of fundamental objections that would take the circle away from its vision, mission, or aims. And that lower bar of consent is what needs to be used in the future when it comes to making decisions, particularly with the Security Council.
Okay, how do we get there? Do we have any more opportunity now for some package of nations to take seriously the possibility of reforming the United Nations and getting support to do it? And how would it be done? Is a group, I believe the elders have been part of a group that have been promoting the idea of a serious revision of the United Nations Charter. But of course, you get the veto power, and the question is, how do you go around that? I'm wondering, let's imagine this. I don't know, I'd love to know whether anybody thinks it's possible, that you set up a parallel organization for countries that want to revise the structure and take account of create something like a parliamentary assembly, which would be representative of the world's population and not the states, and that would do away with the veto in the Security Council and enlarge it to include a good sampling of the world's countries. So if you set that up parallel and then simply said, now for many of our operations, we're going to depend upon all of these UN agencies that already exist. So we hereby recognize the various agencies and departments of the UN, all except for the Security Council and the power of the veto. And so here we have this parallel organization, but we recognize the status of the existing functioning units of the UN. Could that be done? Is there a possibility of actually getting the world's countries to join it? Say, we now belong to two different organizations, the UN and the new UN. And the new UN is just an independent outfit, except we recognize these other bodies. Is something like that a feasible way of moving beyond this blockage that now prevents real UN reform? Does anybody have a thought about that?
I think you can use the existing UN structures. You just need to change the decision framework slightly to consent-based frameworks. If you do that,
you can't legally get it through.
Oh,
there's
no way to modify the rules at the UN?
No, not when the U.S. and the P5 have veto power. No, you can't get it legal. So that's the question. How do you make a new legally legal entity and do it legally? I don't know how. Alexei, do you have an idea how it could be done?
Well, I still can't understand something which interests me really. Does the General Assembly has any power by the majority vote or supermajority vote over the Security Council? If it does, so can it theoretically can the General Assembly, as a representation of the whole world, basically of all the countries, can it collectively override the authorities of the Security Council? I think there should be a mechanism which could make this possible. If so, then I think that the Security Council is the problem now in its current shape and form.
Well, I believe that someplace in the subtext of somewhere, there's an article that people now and then refer to and say, yes, the Security Council could, on its own, revise the General Assembly could, on its own, revise the Security Council and do whatever changes it wants to. But somehow it's never talked about as a serious possibility. And I wish, for example, Robin Collins or some other person who really knows the workings of the UN could be here, or Walter Dorn or somebody. because there may be good answers to that I could give you, but I don't know those answers myself. Does anybody know more about secret potential ways of revising the UN and not having it blocked by the US? No. Yeah.
I don't see any this real way of changing things other than by starting with a strong coalition of the countries that are able, that are, that want to maintain a world based on certain principles and certain values and certain norms.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the UN, we shouldn't idealize the General Assembly or any other UN institution. Because yes, the Security Council, it's the big powers, they all play their game. But then, the UN is also, you have lots of different countries, many of which are very, very far from being a general democracies or are just interested in some, some form of assistance or something like that. You have a system where, the Kingdom of Tonga and Canada and the US have basically one vote. And so it's very simple for powerful nations to manipulate, the crowd in a sense, in many ways.
Well, it's not just the powerful nations, because I think the crucial problem is it's impossible to enforce international law. I mean, we have a reasonable international world court. We have the International Criminal Court. Those seem to be. There's nothing wrong with the way they are set up and work. They're fine, but they have absolutely no power. There is no way of making the world's countries obey. And whether they're a big country or a little country, they just thumb their nose at international law and do what they please. Just as, of course, we've seen Putin doing the last several years. But now, of course, the U.S. has. Actually, the U.S. has always done that. They hardly even bow in the direction of the World Court, and they don't acknowledge its authority significantly. Anyway, I keep talking too much. Go on back to Andre. I'm sorry.
Well, the only a realistic way, and even that is very questionable, is if there is a true coalition of countries that are willing to, work and are willing to work jointly to maintain the key principles of, international law and whatever, and, do not, that are willing to stand up to anyone, including the United States, when it violates those principles. And maybe that could create enough pressure to get other powers to, consider some changes and something like that. But honestly, I don't see any clear path to changes. And it's not a question of just, changing the rules in the UN and in Security Council and so forth. Because that I don't think that would have that much difference. Okay, you'll have the General Assembly vote, so you'll have interested nations and influencing others and buying votes and stuff like that when it's in their interest. You'll have this game. It will be played. It will be the same game in a different form.
And I'm sure that everybody has come here with an agenda of your own, which I have subverted today. And but I'm happy now to open the floor to other topics, things that you need to share with us or want to share with us, and bring us up to date about your own concerns.
We should be more aware of non-governmental organizations. In all of this discussion, we tend to focus on the governments, but a great deal of work is done by non-governmental organizations, and that's not that's true in nearly every country. And I think the greater attention and recognition gives them power, and makes them more effective. I think one of the good things in the United States is that some of the resistance is taking the form of local organizations functioning in the struggle for democracy in the country. Their neighborhoods form committees, cities form coalitions. And it's a long tradition in the United States, but I think it's ending up being strengthened by the experience with people using the power of the state if they hold office, and there's nothing to challenge it. So it was consideration and attention. That's all.
I've got a situation out there in the Palo Alto Baylands that is pretty dramatic, in that I have no gray foxes. I have coyotes moving in. I have it's just the big changes occurring on the landscape. But there's the downside to that. And the downside is that once they get into that Baylands area, it's very difficult to get out. And what that causes is inbreeding, and inbreeding increases the likelihood of the wildlife dying from viruses and various other maladies. And so we need to work on getting the Baylands area or connected up with a healthy environment. And all of this has to do with decreasing the likelihood of the sixth mass extinction, because that's where we're headed with all this. When we talk about wildlife, a lot of people tell me, what does it have to do with me? And I'm about ready to put together a PowerPoint presentation that I'll take out into the public, and it will I hope, create a link between the wild critters that are running through people's backyards at night, and change the attitudes, show the links, and show what, in fact, these wild animals out there have to do with you, because without them, we don't survive. We humans don't survive. And so my job is to open up the territory so that we can have a healthy region down here in the Palo Alto area, and connect that up with other systems, other wild areas, a continuous wildlife corridor system from British Columbia to Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Okay, or it's actually it's called the Wildlands Network, and they're actually going to go beyond. They're going to go into Mexico, because one of the top representatives of this organization is in Mexico. There's another one called.
I'm just trying to imagine now. You would try like a green belt or something, a piece of land that would be kept safe for animals, all the way from Canada and Alaska down to Mexico.
Yes.
And is that a realistic possibility? I mean, somebody owns that land now. How are you going to do it?
It's already happening.
Really?
Wildlands is using people, organizations like my organization to link up with and build in the restoration that's necessary in order to connect A, B, and C.
Now, there are canals, there are waterways, there are roads, there are all kinds of things that crisscross these lands. Do you have mechanisms developed for how you're going to create little tunnels under the highways or overpasses for the animals? Or I saw something yesterday about a canal in Japan where they put sort of like ladders that they were a lot of wildlife would get drowned in their canal, so they put little ladders so that they can climb out. That kind of thing. Is that what you're planning, or is that needed?
Well, yeah, that is, and I am involved with one of those projects. It's a wildlife overcrossing, and it's down in South San Jose in a place called Coyote Valley, and it connects two mountain ranges. The western mountain range is the Santa Cruz Mountains, and the eastern is the Diablo Range. And we're going to put in a wildlife crossing right at the point where those two mountain ranges nearly touch. They don't yet. And Highway 101 is a major, major barrier all the way through the state of California. As I said, this is already happening, these linkages and everything going together. And in coming back to my project, we are going to work to remove concrete from one of the connecting creeks that runs out of the Santa Cruz Mountains down into the San Francisco Bay. And we're going to take that concrete out, build in riparian habitat, so that it becomes a corridor linking those two together.
Let me ask how the concrete is a problem. What does that? It's a barrier of some kind, I presume.
Yeah, well, they took the creek and they channelized it. They just put on the sides and on the bottom, they just put concrete in there so that the water goes, when it's at high water, it's just a sheet of water that's roaring down to the bay. And salmon, steelhead cannot go up that rapid waterway. It's open. It doesn't have any protection on the sides, so the wildlife don't use it. Even if they could, they don't use it. But I want to go back to what you asked about the overcrossings and culverts and so forth like that. The state of California has the state organization Caltrans. They have a budget to build. Part of their budget is to simply build those overpasses and culverts to allow the wildlife to move from one area to another. And so we're really behind in terms of doing that here in California, because Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, and Nevada are way ahead of us in that whole process. And so there's a national connectivity going on right now. I wanted to mention one other thing too. There's another project that's sort of related to the Wildlands Network, and it's called the Yellowstone to Yukon Initiative. And it's mainly run by Canadians on the board. The Canadians make up the bulk of the board of directors for this, and they're working on connecting from Yellowstone to the Yukon, and building in passageways for wildlife to move over that vast amount of territory.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, that is really it makes me, first thing I've heard all day that makes me happy. Please. Yeah.
I will just focus briefly on three topics that I wanted to share with you today. First of them being my experience on Instagram. I sometimes go on that network, on that social medium, and recently I was very happy to notice something that we have been discussing, something that would be great to have, but it's already there, and the videos that are obviously created with the help of AI are marked that way. So there is an AI label next to those videos, so no one will be really confused by whether they're watching something real or something AI created. And you can even press on that button on that AI label or sign, and you can learn more about how it was created and stuff. So some details, which is, I think, great. Then there are some one point which is not so great. This week we had a really painful water outage. We didn't have water for almost 2 days, and that made me think back to the people of Kyiv, who are being bombarded right now, who are lacking not only water, potable water, but also electricity and heating. And the winter is harsh in this part of the world, in Poland and Ukraine. And so my compassion goes to them, and that's the sad part. But then, adhering to the principle of a sandwich, I started with good news. I continued with very sad news, and then I have to end up with something good. And that would be the article that I read today on Popular Mechanics, which dealt with the dogs of the Chernobyl exclusion area. And those wolves, those dogs and wolves, are very different from their mates from other parts of Europe or North America, in that they have developed some genes which protect them from cancer, so they can, over generations, over how many generations of wolves can you get over? Like 40 years since the Chernobyl disaster, which will be this year, in April. Maybe some 10 or more generations, and they have developed some protection, some genetic protection from cancer, which is very inspiring in terms of science, in terms of research, and it possibly will have some ramifications for humans as well. So let's hope that this disaster will give us. We can't go back in time and prevent it, but we can reap some of the fruit of what we have. And let's hope the scientists will come up with something for humans as well.
Kathy O'Connell, I know you've been here with your name the whole hour, but I'd love to see you again and to know a little bit about how you've found this meeting and whether you have something to add and share with us. Kathy is I think you do a lot with film, don't you? And especially Indian films, and your whole history of research has a lot to do with India. Tell us a little bit about yourself, if you will.
I would like to start by saying I enjoyed the discussion very much, but I didn't participate because I felt I really didn't have that much to contribute, but enjoyed the discussion of three-body solution, which it's also been made into a Netflix.
Oh, I've seen the title, yeah.
Yeah, and of course, the political. I grew up in Minnesota, and have my niece is in Minneapolis, so I've been in touch with her, and she lives in Edina, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. And she said, even out there, ice, they see ice trucks driving in their neighborhood, and some of their neighbors are affected by it. So the neighbors are, trying to protect these people. And there's a local Target shop where the ICE people were just parking outside, waiting for several of these employees to come out so they could arrest them. Anyway, it's a very distressing situation. So I certainly do not claim to be an expert on India, but I can claim some expertise in Bengal. And my real area of expertise is Rabindranath Tagore.
Yes.
And his educational theory and practice. I also do some film. I had met Satyajit Ray in the 60s, and so I did a film course on him at U of T. But
are there any new films being produced in India that we should be aware of? Because I certainly haven't. I haven't heard of any films. Well, I don't go out anyway, but are there things that we're missing that we should be aware of?
There were some very good Bangladeshi films. I mean, this is a filmmaker by the name of Tariq Masood, who made a film called The Clay Bird. Thanks,
I'll keep coming back because it's always some of us know each other by now, and it's really getting to be quite a community.
Well, that's it. This is the first time.
But you don't have to be shy about joining. It's always open. We encourage newcomers by all means, especially with different angles and different interests. So thank you for showing up. It's good to see you again after all these years. Let me tell you, we have two different, Project Save the World has two different innovations. And I have to confess that both of them were things that we've thought of doing in the past, but hadn't got around to doing, and we had thought we would gradually do them over a period of a year or two. But in fact, we're speeding it up, trying to get it all done quickly, because we had applied back in February for charitable status. That is an opportunity for people who pay dues or give donations to our organization to receive benefits when it comes to paying their own taxes. And so that it gives a lot of motivation for people when we're doing fundraising. We have not done fundraising, and we will need funds. Frankly, I've been paying almost all the bills all these years, and I'm 94 years old, so you can figure out for yourself that somebody else is going to have to step up, not only to raise money, but also to do the work. So there are various ways in which we're getting other people to do the work. One is that I'll be sharing the times that we produce a new episode of our video series. We've been doing something like 2 per week on the average, and about one of them per week on the average nowadays may very well be hosted and moderated by one of 10 different people that I've reached out to who've agreed that they would be willing to be the moderator or the host of some of the shows. And they mostly represent organizations that I really admire. There's one, for example, the Healthy Planet Action Coalition, which is a group of experts on climate. I know that Brian belongs to that. I don't know that any of the others of you belong to that, but they have a very healthy discussion going on among these experts, and they're talking very technical language every day as they share emails and conversations about various technical climatological issues. Another one is the Pegasus Institute, which is an organization headed by Dr. Neil Arya, a physician in Waterloo, Ontario. and it consists mainly of health professionals who are very interested in peace issues. So once in a while, they will be producing a show. And this week, I think one is coming up about refugees and health issues regarding refugees. There are several others. Doug Saunders will be hosting some of the shows in the future. Doug Saunders is the leading international affairs columnist with the Globe and Mail. He's going to be on our board of directors, I think, as well. And some of you have already met Jill Carr Harris, who lives half the year in India and spends her summers here in Canada. And she knows a lot of people, especially in Africa and Central Asia, and actually the South Caucasus mostly. So she does interviews now and then of people in Georgia and Armenia and Azerbaijan, and Africa and so on. So you'll meet. There are 10 different people who'll be taking turns. That's one of our changes. One of the other changes is the development of something we call working or study groups. We have 6 global risks that we sort of our mandate. We choose to address those, as well as 3 sectors of society that bear upon these risks. That would be the world economy, the global governance systems, and human rights violations, and then the civil society, which would be education, journalism, religion, institutions other than the family or the government or the economy. Every other NGO, for example, would be part of civil society, and the issues that arise there and the ways in which these organizations can help to solve the problems, that would be the sector. So we have these sectors, but they're not equally popular. Our people our members and people who watch the shows are not all equally interested in all of them. They are particularly interested in these 5. One being war and weapons, the regular peace concerns that we've been doing for over 40 some years. Then global warming, or what most people call climate change. And now cyber and artificial intelligence. And then the economy, the global economy, and governance and human rights. So those 5. So people are interested in those, and many people are already following issues about those various topics, specializing in one or the other mostly. So we will have study groups that people can sign up for if you're a member of Project Save the World, or if you are a paid subscriber to our Substack account. You can join one or all, or any of these 5 working groups, and they will each meet about a month before each of the quarterly publications of Peace Magazine, so that they can discuss things going on in their particular sector, whether it's war and weapons or AI or whatever. And they will talk about what's going on and make a report of about 500 words, which we will publish in the magazine from now on. And then that's quarterly. They will meet every 4 times a year. And then we will be having an inquiry for each of these 5 topics once a year. And this inquiry will be along the lines of the one that we did recently with respect to the risks of artificial intelligence. And they will each be along this structure. They will meet 5 consecutive weeks, 1 hour a week, on Wednesdays during what would be about the noon hour in Toronto, but various other places we pick a certain hour with optimum for global membership. And so they meet 5 times. The first 4 times will be private, but will be each session will be for one aspect of their particular topic. And the 5th meeting will be recorded like this, and we will publish it. And that meeting is the one where they attempt to come up with recommendations, policy recommendations that we will create into a document that can be shared and used for lobbying purposes or anything else that you want. So this will be starting about March. And if you're interested in joining a study group, that means that you'll be in touch with each other on your particular interest, your topic, and share information as much as you wish throughout the year, but meet at least quarterly. And maybe you decide to do other things before your quarterly meetings. But at any rate, if you want to do that, I suggest, I believe I've sent out, and I will again send out a Substack notice about how to join and what it would look like. And you can join that way, or you can go to our website, to savetheworld.ca, and you'll see a pop-up there with 2 different bars on it, one of them for the study groups and one for the class, which I'll tell you about. So you can click on the bar, the show me more details, and it will give you the facts that I've just outlined and a way for you to register and sign up for it. I would encourage you to do that because we really, really need to show that we have these things functioning within the next couple of weeks so that we can be very impressive to the people in the Canada Revenue Agency that are examining us and determining whether or not we are doing things that should be regarded as charitable education. So that will be very helpful if you will join. I hope you'll take it seriously and enjoy participating. The second pop-up window on our To Save the World is about a class. And that is simply this. We produce 2 or more, approximately an average of 2 video episodes per week. This will be one of them. There will be the next one this week will be the Pegasus meeting about refugees. And I produce these videos, I edit them, and then we put them up on Substack and send them out to our large mailing list, which is about something over 8,700 computers worldwide. Not everybody opens them, of course. Only a minority of people actually watch the videos. But what we want to do is create an incentive for people to watch the videos. So the incentive is this. You can go there and you can sign up, or you don't even have to sign up. You can just start taking the tests. We're going to produce a quiz for every show that has an article. In addition to the video, we publish a little article about 1,000 words long about the video. That's for people who really didn't have time to watch the whole video but want some idea of what they've missed. So these little short articles will give you some idea of what's going on. So at the end or near on the same post as these about articles, we have a way for you to sign up or just take a quiz, because you can click there and take the quiz and see how you did. And each video presentation with an about show will have a quiz, and it will be 8 items and about 4 options for each one. And if you take it, they will record it in your folder. You have to actually belong to have a membership in Substack to do this. But when you open up your account, they will keep a record of your quiz answers throughout the year 2026. At the end of the year, you may have taken 50 or 100 quizzes, or just 2 or 3. But if you've taken half, 50% of the quizzes that we have posted, and if you've received an average score of 70% or better, then we will send you a certificate. And you can put it on your wall, or you can put it on your CV, or whatever you want. So I've been impressed by the number of grown-ups that actually like to have certificates, even though they're not looking for work. But I guess it's more interesting and valuable to people who may be in the job market and want to show that they have taken and succeeded in passing a year-long series of educational videos. And if you, in fact, have taken 70% of the videos that we make available, and you've passed with a score of 85% or better, your certificate will say that you've passed with distinction. So that some of people will want that, I'm sure. So I want to encourage everybody to go look at our website and these little bars where you can ask for more details and sign up and start taking your quizzes and participate in the study groups that we've set up. Any questions before we say goodbye? Are you
Where
all?
do we access the sign up?
Pardon?
Where do we access the sign up?
It's go to our website, to savetheworld.ca, and there should be a pop-up window, and there are 2 little bars, and you choose whether you want to sign up for the study group or the class, which is about the video, watching the videos and taking the quizzes. Or you can sign up for both. Of course, that would be even better. And if you click more details, it'll give you a form. And otherwise, you should get it in the emails anyway. I've sent out one about the risk, I think, the class, but I haven't sent out an invitation for people to join the study groups, which I will do in the next couple of days. So, do any of you have an interest in joining either of these? No? I hope somebody does.
I don't know.
You maybe? Is that a maybe, Bill?
Maybe.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
I'm going to check it out.
All right.
Yeah, me too. The climate. Yep.
All right. Very good. All right. Anything else we need to say before we say goodbye? It's 5 minutes after the hour, and I will otherwise say thank you for showing up. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, I went to the website. I don't see any events. I'm not seeing what you're talking about, so you might have to provide some clearer instructions.
I will send out the thing to each of you. I am mortified that you're not seeing it there, because I've worked very hard with a couple of people to make sure that it pops up whenever anybody goes to the website for to the home page. So if it's not popping up,
I see.
I can only say it should, it's supposed to, and I'll work on it, but I'll also send you out a form through Substack. So be aware.
Let me just check it real quick, because it may be down to an ad block. Oh yeah, there it is. In my case, it opens well. It says join a project Save the World study group, the first, and then more details, and then enroll in class Global Catastrophic Risks 2026, more details. So maybe it's down to an ad block, some feature which in your browser probably, Brian.
Yeah, I'm on Chrome and I don't see any blocked ads, so it doesn't seem to be working on Chrome.
Well, I can't answer that, except I will get somebody to work on it. I only have access to helpers some of the time, not every minute I want them. So I'll get back to working on it. And
in my case, it works.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there
I
is
did
also
actually see it later. Thanks.
sometimes that little thing says more details. You click on that. Sometimes you have to keep clicking on it, and then eventually it'll show up in behind. But then you have to close the pop-up window bar in order to see the thing that's behind it. So there are little anomalies that I don't particularly like, but well, we're working on it. So thank you all.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'm glad to see all of you this time, and I hope in 1 month we'll get back together. Have a great month. See you.
Thank you so much. You too. Thank you.